At a quiet funeral, a grieving millionaire stands beside his wife's grave, empty, broken, and alone. Suddenly, a little girl he's never seen before touches his arm and whispers 3 words that shatter his world. Who is she? And why did his wife draw pictures of this child before her death? This is a story about grief, love, second chances, and a little girl who teaches a broken man how to feel again. This is not just a story, it's a piece of someone's hidden pain, quietly waiting to be heard. In today's story, we dive into a moment that can change everything, in the most unexpected way. Before we begin, where are you listening from? Canada? The US? Norway? Let us know in the comments, because stories may begin anywhere, but they connect us all. Stay with us until the very end, because sometimes, what breaks your heart can also heal it. And if you believe stories can change lives, hit subscribe. Join our journey. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment. Your voice matters here. The cemetery was too quiet for a woman like Evelyn Hart. The wind dared not howl, the birds refused to sing, and even the leaves clung tightly to their branches, as if mourning too. Beneath a sky heavy with unspoken sorrow, an emerald green canopy covered the gathering of people standing in rows, stiff as statues, shielding themselves from more than just the August sun. They were shielding themselves from the gravity of grief that hung in the air. At the center stood him, Nathaniel Hart, steel gray suit, polished shoes, diamond cufflinks, a man of stature, of legacy, of millions. But today he was a man of ruins. His sharp jaw clenched against trembling emotion. His usually cold blue eyes were swimming in glassy sadness. His hand rested on the edge of the casket like he was holding onto the last piece of a sinking ship. Evelyn Hart had been his wife for 24 years. An artist. A free spirit. A woman who painted joy into every corner of Nathaniel's marble world. Her sudden death in a car accident had pulled the sun out of his sky, and no amount of money, influence, or control could bring her back. The priest's voice echoed faintly through the mist of mourning, offering verses that sounded more like echoes than comfort. Nathaniel heard nothing, not the prayers, not the sobs, not the crunching footsteps on gravel behind him, until a small, trembling hand touched his forearm. Startled, Nathaniel turned, and there she was, a girl, no older than 7, barefoot, wearing a sun-bleached pink dress that hung from her like it had seen too many nights. Her cheeks were smudged, her hair tangled. But it was her eyes, those wide, ocean-deep eyes, that made his breath catch. She looked at him like she knew something he didn't. She opened her mouth and whispered, "She promised me." 3 words. Soft, haunting, impossible. Then, before he could speak, before he could think, the girl turned and disappeared into the crowd. Nathaniel staggered back, heart pounding. He had no idea who she was, but somehow he knew this was the beginning of something he couldn't explain. As rain begins to fall and mourners start to leave, Nathaniel searches desperately for the mysterious girl. But the more he asks, the more he realizes no one else saw her. Rain had not been forecasted. Yet as the last syllable of the priest's prayer faded, the sky cracked open in a slow weep, like heaven itself had held back its tears until Evelyn's name was laid to rest. Nathaniel stood frozen. The green canopy flapped in the wind behind him, and people rushed for cover, their umbrellas blossoming like muted flowers. But Nathaniel didn't move. His eyes were locked on the path where the little girl had vanished. His heart thundered with the surreal echo of her voice. She promised me. He scanned the cemetery, pupils wide and wild. Was it a hallucination, a side effect of grief? But the warmth of her tiny hand had been real, so real it lingered on his skin. "Nathaniel." A voice called behind him. It was Charles, his longtime assistant and friend. "You all right?" Nathaniel shook his head faintly. "Did you see her?" "See who?" "The little girl, pink dress, barefoot. She touched my arm, said something about Evelyn." Charles blinked, confused. There was no little girl. Not here, not among the guests. No, not a guest, a stranger. Nathaniel stepped forward, eyes darting. She said Evelyn promised her something, and then she was gone. Charles gently put a hand on Nathaniel's shoulder. "Nate, you've barely slept for days. You're grieving. Sometimes." "I'm not imagining this," Nathaniel snapped, louder than intended. A few heads turned. The rain grew heavier, streaking across his suit and soaking his silvering hair. He didn't wait. He stepped away from Charles and the other mourners, away from the procession, and walked deeper into the cemetery. His eyes combed every shadow between the tombstones. The girl couldn't have gotten far, not barefoot. Not in this weather. His polished shoes squelched in the mud. His cufflinks, Evelyn's final birthday gift, were now darkened by water and grit. He passed a cluster of mausoleums, shouting over the wind, "Hello, little girl, please, come out." Nothing but silence. The trees whispered in response, swaying in rhythm with his breathless desperation. Nathaniel wandered further toward the older part of the graveyard, where the stones were weathered and names had eroded into anonymity. There was a stillness here, broken only by the patter of rain and the clinking of iron gates swinging in the distance. Then he saw it. A small pink blur near the statue of an angel. He sprinted toward it, nearly slipping. But by the time he reached the spot, it was only a rose-colored scarf, tangled on the foot of the statue, drenched in rain. Still warm, he picked it up and clutched it. She'd been here. He hadn't imagined her. He turned back to the ceremony grounds, now emptying fast. The canopy was being disassembled, the workers moving methodically, unaware of the hole in Nathaniel's universe. Back at the grave, Evelyn's casket had been lowered, the priest long gone. Nathaniel stood there alone, the sky gray, his heart gray. "I don't understand," he whispered to the wind. "Who was she, Evie? What did you promise that I don't know about?" No answer came, only the soft hiss of rain striking the lowered casket below. Then something clicked. Nathaniel pulled out his phone. His fingers trembled. He dialed the number of Evelyn's art studio, a separate sanctuary where she often disappeared for hours. The studio manager, Martha, answered. "Hart, I'm so sorry again for your loss. I need to know something," he said, voice low. Did Evelyn ever mention a child? A girl? She would have been maybe 7 years old. A child? Martha hesitated. "Well, Evelyn did have a weekly visit from someone. A young girl. She didn't tell me who she was. Just said she was special." Nathaniel's breath caught. When did this start? 6 months ago. 6 months. Evelyn never told him, never mentioned her. "What did they do?" he asked. "Did she teach her art?" "No," Martha replied. "They just talked. Laughed. Sometimes the little girl would bring her drawings to show Evelyn. I remember her saying once, 'She makes me feel like a mother again.'" Nathaniel's legs gave way, and he sat on the nearest marble bench, soaked to the bone. A mother again. Evelyn had always wanted children. They'd tried, and failed. The years passed, the door quietly closed. He thought they had made peace with it. But what if Evelyn had found another way? The scarf in his hand felt heavier now, like it carried secrets. Nathaniel stared at the horizon, where the trees blurred into the rain. He made a silent vow. He had to find that girl, no matter what it took. Back at Evelyn's art studio, Nathaniel discovers an old sketchbook filled with drawings, and a name he's never seen before. Could it be the little girl's? The next morning, the storm had passed, but it had left something behind in Nathaniel's heart. A restlessness. A gnawing emptiness that had nothing to do with Evelyn's death and everything to do with the child who whispered 3 unforgettable words. He arrived at Evelyn's art studio just after dawn. The building sat tucked between 2 worn brick warehouses on the edge of the city, a sanctuary painted with soft lilac tones and ivy curling up the outer walls. Evelyn had chosen it because it reminded her of her grandmother's house in Provence. Now it stood silent, a museum of memories. Martha greeted him at the door, a warm, middle-aged woman in a cardigan too big for her. She looked concerned but didn't ask questions, just stepped aside. "She mostly used the 2nd floor," she said. "It's just the way she left it. I didn't have the heart to clean up anything." Nathaniel nodded silently and ascended the narrow wooden stairs. Each creak beneath his shoes sounded like a whisper from the past. As he reached the landing, he paused. The room smelled like turpentine, lavender, and Evelyn. Her spirit was still here, clinging to the soft light that filtered through the dusty skylight. Canvases lined the walls, some unfinished, some vibrant and alive. One painting caught his eye immediately. A child's face, painted in impressionistic tones, large blue eyes, disheveled hair, that pink dress. His chest tightened. It was her. He crossed the room to Evelyn's old oak worktable. Notebooks, paintbrushes, dried-out palettes scattered in elegant chaos. He searched methodically through the sketch pads until he found one tucked beneath a layer of fabric swatches. The leather, bound cover had Evelyn's initials embossed on the front in gold. He opened it. Page after page of pencil sketches, most of the same little girl. Laughing, sleeping, hugging a small teddy bear with one eye missing. And at the top of one page in Evelyn's delicate handwriting. For Myra. Nathaniel whispered the name aloud. Myra. It sounded soft, fragile, like a breath of wind before a storm. Flipping through the pages, he noticed notes scribbled beside some of the drawings. "She says her dreams are made of birds." Mira asked if souls can live in crayons. "She calls me Mama Evie when she forgets to be brave." Each note carved deeper into Nathaniel's heart. Evelyn hadn't just painted this girl. She knew her, loved her. Mira wasn't a fleeting acquaintance. She had been part of Evelyn's soul in those final months. Why hadn't she told him? Guilt gnawed at his chest. He'd been busy with mergers, with client calls, with anything but Evelyn. Perhaps she'd tried to explain and he hadn't listened. Perhaps he'd made her feel that this secret, this bond, was too fragile to share in his world of numbers and deadlines. He turned to the last page. One final sketch, Evelyn and Mira sitting side by side on the studio floor. The little girl held a paintbrush like a sword, and Evelyn smiled like the sun itself beamed through her. Below it a message, "If I'm gone, Nathaniel, please find her. She matters." His breath caught. The pencil letters blurred as tears welled in his eyes. He clutched the sketchbook to his chest like a lifeline. Evelyn hadn't just bonded with this girl. She had entrusted Nathaniel with her, after death. That one sentence was more powerful than 1,000 wills or last wishes. But where was Mira now? He went back downstairs, gripping the sketchbook like sacred scripture. Martha, he said, do you remember anything else? Did she ever drop the girl off here? Mention a family name. Where she came from? Martha furrowed her brow. No. She always arrived alone. Sometimes with a backpack. She never said much, except that she lived down where the river sings. I thought it was just a child's way of describing a place. Nathaniel frowned. The river. There's a homeless camp, she whispered, almost ashamed to say it. Under the Waverly Bridge. People say it's been growing ever since the city shut down the shelters. A chill passed through him. Could Evelyn's secret companion, this small, imaginative child, really be homeless? Why didn't Evelyn tell me? He asked aloud, though the question wasn't really for Martha. Martha softened. Maybe she thought you'd try to fix it with money, and maybe that wasn't what Mira needed. He lowered his eyes. It hurt, because it was probably true. That night, Nathaniel sat alone in Evelyn's old reading nook in the studio. He turned the pages of the sketchbook again and again, memorizing every detail of Mira's face, every phrase Evelyn had written. He had buried Evelyn yesterday. But today, something inside him had woken up. He now had a name. He had a place. And more than anything, he had a promise to keep. Nathaniel ventures under Waverly Bridge in search of Mira. But what he finds among the shadows will shake him more than he ever expected. The next morning, Nathaniel stood at the edge of the Waverly Bridge, his tailored coat flapping in the breeze, completely out of place against the backdrop of rusted metal, graffiti-stained concrete, and the echoing rumble of passing trucks above. He hadn't been to this part of the city in over a decade. Not since a property development deal had fallen through, leaving this corner of town in bureaucratic limbo. Now, he wasn't here as a businessman. He was here as a man trying to fulfill a dying wish. A man haunted by a little girl with tangled hair and ocean-deep eyes who had whispered, "She promised me." Below, the river gurgled and hissed, winding through the forgotten arteries of the city like a song only the lost knew the words to. He tightened his grip on Evelyn's sketchbook. His map, his guide, his only clue. He climbed down a concrete embankment, carefully avoiding jagged glass and bent nails, and ducked beneath the bridge. The air shifted. It smelled of damp wood, gasoline, and sorrow. He stepped into a hidden world. There were makeshift tents made of tarps and old sheets, shopping carts filled with clothing and tin cans. Smoke curled from a burned barrel in the center of a gravel clearing. A few people looked up, wary, tired, guarded. Life here was hard and trust was harder. Nathaniel approached slowly. He wasn't used to this kind of vulnerability. The man who once sat at the head of billion-dollar boardroom tables now felt small and exposed beneath concrete beams. "Excuse me," he called out gently. "I'm looking for a little girl. Her name is Mira." A woman in a tattered coat eyed him, narrowing her gaze. "What do you want with her?" He hesitated. "A friend of someone who cared about her very much. Evelyn Hart. She passed away 2 days ago." The woman's face softened slightly. "I remember Evelyn. She'd come down here sometimes. With a sketchbook. She always brought crayons." "Then Mira is real?" he asked, almost whispering. "She's real, all right," the woman said. "But she don't talk to many. She runs. Disappears for days." Nathaniel's voice cracked. "Do you know where she might be now?" The woman pointed toward a cluster of tents closer to the river, where the water lapped gently against the stones. "She sleeps there sometimes. By the red crate. But I don't think she's come back since yesterday." Nathaniel walked in the direction she'd pointed. His heart pounded with hope and dread. He found the red crate. Beside it was a tangle of faded blankets, a broken teddy bear with one eye missing, just like the one in Evelyn's drawing, and a half-eaten granola bar. He sank to his knees. It was her place, her little corner of the world. He gently picked up the bear and cradled it in his palm. It felt like holding Evelyn's heart. Everything about this child, the forgottenness, the loneliness, the wild imagination. Evelyn had seen her, loved her, and now she was gone. "She's not here right now," came a small voice behind him. Nathaniel turned quickly. A boy no older than 10 stood barefoot, arms crossed. "Are you looking for Mira?" the boy asked. "Yes," Nathaniel said carefully. "Do you know her?" "She's my friend," the boy said, chin raised. "We watch stars together. But she doesn't like grown-ups. She thinks they always leave." Nathaniel swallowed the lump in his throat. "I don't want to leave. I just want to talk to her. I brought this." He held up the sketchbook. The boy stepped closer, peeking at it. His eyes widened. "That's her bear." "Did you draw that?" "No," Nathaniel said softly. "My wife did. Evelyn. Mira visited her studio. She called her Mama Evie." The boy's eyes flickered with understanding, then sadness. "She cried when she heard she died," he whispered. "Didn't come back all night. She said she had no one left." Nathaniel knelt before him. "Please, do you know where she might go when she's sad?" The boy hesitated, then nodded. Sometimes she hides in the train yard. There's an old passenger car with purple seats. She pretends it's taking her somewhere warm. Nathaniel stood, "Thank you." As he walked back toward his car, the sketchbook hugged tight to his chest. He whispered Evelyn's name like a prayer. He had found the river that sang. Now he was chasing the echoes of a child's broken world. One heartbeat at a time. Nathaniel finds the abandoned train car the boy described. But when he finally sees Mira again, her reaction is not what he expects. The abandoned train yard lay just beyond the industrial outskirts of the city, where rust swallowed steel and time stood still. Tracks twisted like forgotten veins under a hazy August sky, cracked and overgrown with weeds. Nathaniel parked his car outside the rusted chain link fence and climbed through a gap, careful not to snag his coat. A bitter wind whispered through the hollow cars. Crows called from distant metal roofs, and broken windows shimmered like old memories. Nathaniel moved cautiously, Evelyn's sketchbook tucked under one arm, the one-eyed teddy bear under the other. He scanned for purple seats, his only clue. He passed car after car, each one a ghost of movement, of destinations long since abandoned. Then, near the far end of the yard, he saw a faded maroon passenger car marked, "No Sempen." Its door hung slightly ajar. He approached quietly. Inside, dust swirled in golden beams slicing through broken skylights. The scent of rust, mildew, and faint lavender lingered in the stale air. Rows of cracked purple seats lined either side. The cushions were torn and speckled with age, but they still held color. Color enough for a child's imagination to build a kingdom. And there she was, Mira, curled up on one of the seats near the back, knees to her chest, arms around herself. Her face was streaked with dried tears, and her pink dress was even more faded than he remembered. Nathaniel's breath caught. The girl from the funeral. The girl from Evelyn's drawings. She was fragile. And here. He stepped gently onto the creaking metal floor. "Mara," he said softly. Her head jerked up. Her eyes went wide, blue, stormy. Guarded, she stared at him for a long moment, not speaking, not moving.
"I'm Nathaniel,"
he said, voice trembling. "Evelyn was my wife." Amira blinked, slowly, her expression unreadable. "I saw you," he added. "At the funeral? You touched my arm." She looked away. "I have something," he said, and held up the sketchbook and the teddy bear. "Evelyn drew these. For you." Her head snapped toward him at the sight of the bear. She stood quickly, too quickly, and backed away down the aisle. "Don't come closer," she said, voice shaking but defiant. "I won't," he said quickly, raising both hands. "I promise. I want to talk. Please." Silence stretched between them. The soft groan of the wind outside filled the void. "She's gone," Mira finally said, barely above a whisper. "Yes," Nathaniel said. "I'm sorry." Mira looked down at the floor. "She said she would never leave, not like the others. But she did." Nathaniel stepped one foot forward, still cautious. "I don't think she meant to leave you. She loved you. She called me her little soul bird," Mira said, voice cracking. "She said I was the color in her gray days." The tears welled in Nathaniel's eyes. "She never told me about you," he said, "not until I found her sketchbook. I think maybe she was afraid I wouldn't understand. She said you lived in a glass tower," Mira said, wiping her nose with the sleeve of her dress. "That you were always busy with your empire." Nathaniel let out a faint, broken laugh. "That sounds like her." Amira watched him closely now, less afraid, but still unsure.
"Why are you here?"
she asked. "What do you want?" "I want to know you," Nathaniel said honestly. "I want to know why she loved you. I want to keep her promise." Amira tilted her head. "What promise?" He stepped closer slowly and handed her the sketchbook. She took it hesitantly, flipping through the pages. Her small fingers trembled as she saw the drawings. "That's me," she said, voice barely audible. "That's my bear." And Nathaniel reached into his pocket and handed her the stuffed animal. Mira gasped and hugged it tight, burying her face in its fur. "She kept it for you," he said. For a long time neither of them spoke. Then Mira looked up. Her eyes searched his face, trying to find something, truth maybe, or intention. "She told me once," Mira said, "that if she couldn't come back, someone else would. Someone who'd stay." And Nathaniel nodded slowly. "I'd like to be that someone. If you'll let me." Mira looked away again. "People always say things like that. And then they disappear." "I've disappeared from a lot of things," Nathaniel admitted. "I don't want to disappear from this." The words hung in the air like a vow. She held the sketchbook to her chest, then quietly turned and sat back on the seat. After a long pause, she said, "I get hungry at night." He smiled gently. "Then let's start with dinner." And Nathaniel takes Mira to dinner and tries to bridge the gap between their worlds. But a secret she reveals over dessert leaves him speechless. The diner sat on the edge of the city. A little chrome, wrapped relic with a flickering neon sign that hummed above the door. Rosie's Cafe. Open all night. It wasn't the kind of place Nathaniel Hart normally stepped into. No valet, no reservations, no imported wines. But to Mira, it might as well have been a castle. She pressed her nose against the glass before entering, wide-eyed at the spinning stools and the rows of colorful pies behind the counter. She still clutched her teddy bear tightly, and the sketchbook peeked from the worn strap of her backpack. Nathaniel gently opened the door and let her in first. The warmth hit them both, washing off the night chill. A waitress in a pink uniform looked up and gave them a curious smile. "Booth or counter, Han?" "Booth, please," Nathaniel replied. They slid into a red vinyl booth at the back. Mira sat across from him, her legs swinging under the table, her eyes darting around like a sparrow unsure whether to settle. Nathaniel handed her a menu. She stared at it as if it were written in another language. "Ever had pancakes for dinner?" he asked with a smile. Mira shook her head slowly. "Only seen them in movies." "Then it's time for your first." When the waitress came by, Mira shyly ordered pancakes with strawberries and whipped cream. Nathaniel asked for black coffee and a grilled cheese, though his appetite was buried somewhere beneath his grief. As they waited, he noticed how Mira scanned every inch of the diner, not nervously, but attentively, as if memorizing the moment. He wondered how long it had been since she'd eaten at a table, used a clean fork, or heard laughter from a nearby booth without fear. "You like it here?" he asked softly. She nodded. "It smells like cinnamon and warmth." He smiled. "That's Rosie's signature scent. Probably a secret weapon. Everything feels safe," she said, voice barely above a whisper. Their food arrived moments later. Mira stared at her plate as if she didn't believe it was hers. "You can eat?" Nathaniel chuckled gently. "No spell required." And she picked up her fork and tasted the first bite. Her eyes widened like magic had just bloomed on her tongue. "It's warm," she whispered. "It's really warm." And Nathaniel felt something uncoil in his chest. Watching her eat was like watching Evelyn paint, full of wonder, slow joy, and a depth that couldn't be explained. Halfway through the meal, Mira set her fork down, wiped her mouth with a napkin, and looked him straight in the eye. "She came to see me the day before she died?" she said. "Evelyn." Nathaniel leaned in. "She did. She gave me this," Mira said, pulling a small silver pendant from around her neck. It was a locket shaped like a heart. "I've never seen that before," he murmured. "She said it was the first thing you ever gave her," Mira said, "a long time ago. Before the towers and the money. She said it reminded her of who you were, and who you still could be." Nathaniel's throat tightened. "She told me," Mira continued, "that people lose themselves, but they can come back. She said if I ever saw you again, to show you this, and to say," she hesitated, looked down. Her fingers tightened around the pendant. "To say, come back, Nathaniel." He felt something inside him break open. The sharp, suffocating grief gave way to something softer, a raw achy of longing and love. "I didn't know she said that," he whispered. "I didn't know she still believed in me like that." "She did," Mira said firmly. "Even when you didn't see her." The waitress came by, topped off his coffee, and disappeared again, giving them space. Nathaniel took a long breath, trying to steady the wave of emotions. He reached across the table, slowly resting his hand palm up, an offering. Mira looked at it. Then cautiously she placed her small hand in his. It felt like trust. Like the first page of something unwritten. "I don't know how to do this," Nathaniel said quietly. "But I'd like to try. I'd like to be part of your life, if you'd let me." She didn't answer right away. She looked out the window, where raindrops slid down the glass like falling stars. "Evelyn once asked me what I wished for," Mira said. "And I said I wished someone would see me, and stay." Her gaze returned to his. Maybe this is that wish coming true. They finished the meal in quiet understanding, the booth holding the weight of something sacred. As they left the diner, Mira tugged at his sleeve. "Can I come with you?" Nathaniel turned to her, eyes stinging, heart full. "Absolutely," he said. Mira follows Nathaniel home. But the house that once held only silence and sorrow begins to stir with new life, until Mira asks a question Nathaniel isn't ready to answer. Nathaniel's mansion stood on the northern edge of the city like a monument to success. Tall, cold, and heartbreakingly silent. Glass panels stretched across the upper floors, reflecting the deep gray clouds overhead. Wrought iron gates opened slowly as his car rolled through, the only sound the soft whir of the engine and the occasional crunch of gravel beneath the tires. Inside, Mira clung to her teddy bear, her wide eyes flicking from the marble staircase to the chandelier above, to the velvet curtains swaying in the breeze of the central air. "It's really big," she whispered, her voice echoing faintly through the massive foyer. Nathaniel set his keys on the console table and gave her a small smile, too big for just one person. Always was. Mira walked in slowly, her shoes making soft tapping sounds against the polished floors. She paused by a grand oil painting of Evelyn hanging over the fireplace, one of the few personal touches Nathaniel had allowed in this otherwise sterile home. "She looks different here," Mira said. Nathaniel stepped beside her. "That was painted at a gala years ago. I think she was pretending to like opera." She liked sunlight better, Mira said confidently, and gardens, and music you could dance to. He glanced at her, surprised. She told you that? She told me everything. Those words struck him deeper than he expected. For years he had only half listened to Evelyn, nodding through her stories, rushing through their dinners, skipping weekends because business was always louder than love. Yet this child had heard everything he hadn't. He led her up the staircase, pausing at the landing. Would you like to see your room? Mira blinked up at him. My room? If you're going to stay here, he said gently, you should have a space that's yours. She didn't say anything, just followed him down the hallway. He stopped at a room Evelyn had once suggested they turn into a nursery. He never agreed, he wasn't ready. Not then. He opened the door. The room was empty. Bare white walls, polished floors, a few storage boxes stacked in the corner. But the sunlight poured in through wide windows, making the space glow. It's nothing fancy yet, Nathaniel said, but we can paint the walls, pick out furniture. Maybe hang some of your drawings. Mira stepped inside cautiously. Walking to the center of the room, she looked up, then down, then turned in a slow circle. Can I put glow stars on the ceiling? She asked, voice soft. He smiled. You can do anything you want with it. Amira set her teddy bear down in the corner and took off her backpack. She sat cross-legged on the floor, like she was claiming her little patch of the universe. Nathaniel watched her quietly. This was the first time since Evelyn died that the house didn't feel like a tomb. For the first time, the silence wasn't oppressive. It was waiting. After a few moments, Mira looked up at him. Can I ask you something? She said. Of course. She tilted her head. Why didn't you and Evelyn ever have kids? The question landed with a quiet thud, heavier than the walls could contain. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. His shoulders stiffened. We've tried, he said slowly. Mira said nothing, just waited. There were complications, he continued. We lost one, and after that we stopped trying. The words burned coming out. He hadn't said them in years. Maybe not ever, not like this. She wanted to try again, he added after a pause. But I couldn't face the loss again. I buried myself in work. I told myself it was the right thing, safer, smarter. Amira looked down at her hands. She said you built walls so high even she couldn't see over them. He nodded. She was right? Silence. Then Mira asked, do you think if you had a child, you would have loved them the way she loved me? He knelt down beside her. I don't know what kind of father I would have been, he admitted, but I know that if you let me, I want to try to be someone you can count on. Not because Evelyn wanted me to, but because you matter? Mira's eyes glistened. She leaned forward slowly, resting her forehead against his shoulder. And for the first time since Evelyn's death, Nathaniel let the tears come, not sharp or heavy, but slow and cleansing. The kind that carved a path through grief and into something more tender. That night, Nathaniel brought her a mattress, fresh sheets, and a nightlight shaped like a moon. He sat with her until she drifted off, the teddy bear cradled in her arms, the pendant from Evelyn resting on her chest. He stood in the doorway, watching the rise and fall of her breath, and something deep inside him shifted. Not a return to who he used to be, but the beginning of someone new. While walking through Evelyn's overgrown backyard garden, Mira discovers a buried tin box, and what's inside reveals a secret that changes everything. The garden had once been Evelyn's favorite place. It stretched behind the mansion like a forgotten poem. Rose bushes now wild with thorns, lavender grown tall and unruly, ivy scaling trellises that groaned under the weight of neglect. Butterflies used to dance here. Evelyn used to sing. But after her passing, it became a cemetery of color, overrun by silence and time. On a sun-dappled afternoon, Mira wandered into the garden with her sketchbook tucked under her arm. Nathaniel had told her she could explore anywhere she liked. The house was hers to know, to shape, to fill with life again. She paused beneath a crumbling wooden archway, the word, bloom, still barely visible above it in Evelyn's faded brushstrokes. A breeze passed, stirring the scent of rosemary and old memories. Mira walked deeper, brushing her fingers along the tops of overgrown herbs. She paused by a rusted watering can, its spout broken and mouth wide open as if still hoping to be filled. Something about this place felt sacred, like Evelyn's laughter might echo from the wind if Mira listened hard enough. She reached a stone bench half sunken into the soil. Wild mint had crept across its base. As she cleared the vines away, her foot struck something buried beneath the earth. Thunk. Curious, she dropped to her knees and started to dig with her hands. The soil was soft and damp. Within moments, her fingers scraped metal. She unearthed a small, rusted tin box wrapped in a faded pink ribbon. She glanced toward the house. Nathaniel was inside on a call. Heart fluttering, she pulled the ribbon loose and lifted the lid. Inside lay a folded letter, a photograph, and a small paintbrush wrapped in lace. The letter had Evelyn's handwriting. Mira recognized the sweeping curls and careful pressure on every letter. She opened it, and the scent of lavender and turpentine rose from the paper. To the one who finds this, If you're reading this, it means the garden is still alive in some way. I hope the roses still remember how to bloom. I buried this here not because I wanted to hide it, but because I wanted it to be discovered when it was meant to be. Just like love. Just like you. If you are Mira, then I want you to know, with every color in my heart, that you were my second chance. My answered prayer. You reminded me that love doesn't always come in the form we expect. But that doesn't make it any less real. You made me feel like a mother. Like I could still create life even when my body no longer could. And if you're Nathaniel, I hope you're not just finding this letter, but that you found her. I know you. I've always known the tenderness buried beneath your ambition. You loved me, but you never knew how to let yourself love completely. I pray that Mira teaches you how. Take care of each other. Don't let the world harden what's still soft in you. All my love. Always Evelyn. Mira's hands trembled as she refolded the letter. Her heart beat like a drum in her chest. She stared at the photo next, a candid image of her and Evelyn in the studio, laughing, arms covered in paint, like two souls who had collided in just the right way at just the right time. She traced Evelyn's face with her finger. I miss you, she whispered. Then footsteps crunched behind her. Mira, Nathaniel's voice. She turned quickly, clutching the box. His eyes dropped to the open tin in her lap. He froze. Where did you find that? In the dirt, she said, breathless. By the bench. It's from her. He walked toward her, slowly kneeling beside her. She placed the letter in his hands. As he read it, his expression changed, eyes widening, mouth slightly open. When he reached the end, his hand covered his face. He didn't cry, not this time. But the silence that followed was heavier than grief. It was gratitude. She knew, he said quietly. She knew I'd need this, that we'd both need this. Mira leaned into his side, and he wrapped his arm around her instinctively. She called me her second chance, she whispered. Do you think she meant that? I know she did. Well, for a long time they just sat there in the garden. The world slowed down. A butterfly landed on a broken bloom nearby. The sun warmed the back of their necks. Nathaniel looked at the small paintbrush wrapped in lace. Do you want to make this garden beautiful again? He asked her. Mira looked around, eyes brightening. Yes, but only if we paint it together. He smiled, a real smile, one that hadn't touched his face in months. I'd like that, he said. More than you know. As Mira settles into her new life, echoes of Evelyn begin to emerge in unexpected places throughout the house, and one discovery in the attic unearths a truth Nathaniel never saw coming. The transformation of Evelyn's garden had become their ritual. Each morning, Mira would race outside in her oversized sun hat and paint-stained overalls, carrying a basket of tools Nathaniel had bought her. She'd pick weeds, replant flowers, and hum the songs Evelyn once taught her. Nathaniel often joined her after breakfast, kneeling in the dirt beside her, trying to remember the names of plants and how to tell weeds from wildflowers. But it wasn't just the garden that was coming alive. The house, once frozen in marble silence, began to whisper. It started subtly. Mira claimed she could feel Evelyn in the hallway outside the studio, where dust still clung to old canvases and blank frames. At first, Nathaniel chalked it up to a child's longing or imagination filling the void left behind. Then came the music. One evening, as Mira was reading in her new bedroom and Nathaniel was sipping tea in the study, the faint sound of a piano drifted through the house. Nathaniel froze. Evelyn's piano. He walked down the corridor slowly, heart in his throat. The melody was soft, familiar, melancholic. Evelyn had composed it herself years ago, a piece she never finished, always saying it would be complete, when her life was. He entered the music room, empty. The piano was closed, silent, but the air still tingled with sound. Mira peeked in moments later, clutching her stuffed beer. I heard it too, she whispered. Nathaniel gave a shaky smile. Maybe she's just reminding us she's still around. Mira nodded solemnly. Maybe she wants us to find the rest of her. Those words stayed with Nathaniel. The next morning, with the sun warming the marble floors, he pulled down the attic ladder and climbed into the one space he'd avoided since Evelyn died. The attic had always been Evelyn's domain, a place for keepsakes, old sketchbooks, dusty trunks filled with letters and vintage fabric. He expected cobwebs, forgotten furniture, maybe a few mice. He didn't expect what he found. In the far corner of the attic, tucked beneath a worn quilt and behind a crate labeled E.H. Paris, sat a heavy cedar box with a brass lock. It wasn't labeled. It was covered in dust, but the lock was clean, used recently. Nathaniel hesitated, then brought the box downstairs. He didn't open it right away. Something told him it wasn't meant to be opened without Mira. Later that evening, after dinner, they sat together on the living room floor. The fire crackled behind them, casting golden light on the box between them. She left it for us, Mira said quietly. I can feel it. Nathaniel nodded and turned the key he found inside the sketchbook. With a soft click, the box opened. Inside was a stack of letters, dozens of them, each addressed in Evelyn's elegant handwriting. Most were labeled with dates. but a few were marked simply to Nathaniel for when you're ready. To Mira, if I'm not there to say goodbye. To both of you for the day the house is no longer empty. Mira's hands trembled as she picked up hers, but Nathaniel placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Maybe we read them together, he said. She nodded. They opened the one marked, to both of you. To my dearest loves, if this letter is in your hands, it means something extraordinary has happened. Two broken hearts have found each other in my absence. I don't know how or when you'll find each other. But I always believed love creates impossible bridges, even after we're gone. Mira, my bright little star. You gave me more joy in a few months than I'd known in years. You reminded me that motherhood is not just about birth, but about being there, seeing someone, loving them without condition. Nathaniel, you were always so afraid of softness. You thought grief made you weak, that tenderness made you vulnerable. But I see now, if you're reading this with her beside you, then you've become everything I always hoped you would. Love her. Let her love you. Make a home not with walls and paintings, but with stories, laughter, and second chances. I loved you both. Always. Evelyn. Mira wiped her eyes, silent tears streaking her cheeks. Nathaniel couldn't speak at all. He just stared into the fire, clutching the letter like it might disappear if he let go. Minutes passed, maybe hours. Then Mira leaned into him and whispered, I think she was right. This house isn't empty anymore. Nathaniel nodded, his voice barely audible. No, sweet girl, it's not. In the weeks that followed, they read the rest of the letters together. Some funny, some painful, some bursting with color. Evelyn had left behind a roadmap made of ink and memory. Through her words, she stitched them closer. Two strangers bound by the same love. And every now and then, when the house grew quiet, the piano would play. Just a few notes. Just enough to remind them. Evelyn was still here. Mira is assigned a family tree project at school, but as she digs into her past, a surprising clue about her real parents emerges, one that shakes everything Nathaniel thought he knew about her. The start of September brought a new rhythm to the house. Mira, now officially enrolled in a nearby private school, adjusted quickly. She made friends, brought home art projects, and filled the once silent kitchen with stories about science experiments and playground games. Her laughter, light, honest, whole, echoed through the mansion like sunlight through stained glass. Nathaniel had become a constant in her life. Every morning, he packed her lunch, walked her to the gate, and stood by the driveway until the school bus disappeared around the curve. Then he returned home, not to a boardroom or a penthouse, but to Evelyn's studio, where he slowly began learning how to paint. One Thursday afternoon, Mira came bursting through the front door, backpack swinging. I have a project, she called out. And it's huge. Nathaniel emerged from the study, wiping charcoal from his hands. What kind of project? A family tree, she said, breathless. We have to build it on a poster board, with pictures and stories, and I have to tell the class where I come from. She sounded excited at first, but then her eyes dimmed. Except I don't know where I come from. Nathaniel knelt down beside her. We can figure it out together. You have Evelyn. You have me now. That's something. She gave a small nod, but her shoulders sagged as she slipped off her shoes. That evening, they gathered in the dining room with markers, scissors, glue sticks, and an empty poster board. Nathaniel printed photos of Evelyn and himself, and Mira added drawings of her teddy bear in the garden. But when they reached the part where her own roots were meant to go, her real parents, Mira hesitated. I don't remember much, she said, chewing the end of her pencil. Just foggy things. A lady who smelled like vanilla. A song, something about hummingbirds. And Nathaniel gently encouraged her. Anything is a start. I remember, she said slowly, being in a car, crying. Someone said we'd come back soon. But no one ever did. Her voice trailed off. Nathaniel reached into his pocket and handed her a folded paper. What's this? I had a friend do some checking, he said gently. Hospitals. Social services. Just in case you ever wanted answers. This is your intake report from when you were found under Waverly Bridge. You were listed as Mira, presumed name age 5. She opened the page slowly. At the bottom was a scanned image, a tiny scrap of paper that had been found in her backpack. It read for Mira. She is loved. Protect her. Below that, scrawled faintly in cursive, was a name. Clara Hollis. Mira stared at it. Clara? Could be your mother? Nathaniel said quietly. Or someone who cared enough to leave you with a name and a message. She whispered the name again. Clara Hollis. Suddenly, Mira shot up from the table and ran upstairs. Nathaniel followed, heart pounding. She sprinted into her bedroom and dug through her backpack. After a few moments, she pulled out the locket Evelyn had given her, the one she always wore even while she slept. I never opened it, Mira said. I was scared. I thought maybe if I did she'd really be gone. And Nathaniel knelt beside her. Do you want to open it now? She hesitated, then nodded. Her small fingers fumbled with the clasp. The locket creaked open, revealing a tiny photograph and a slip of folded paper. The photograph was of a young woman, smiling gently. Her features were soft, hazel eyes, auburn hair. She wore a simple floral dress and a pendant that matched the locket in Mira's hands. Mira's breath caught in her throat. That's her. Nathaniel picked up the slip of paper and unfolded it. The handwriting matched the intake note. Mira, you are brave. You are beautiful. If the world is cruel, be kinder. If it is cold, burn brighter. I will always love you. Mama. Mira didn't speak. She simply pressed the locket to her heart and closed her eyes. Her lips moved silently, as if mouthing a prayer only she could understand. Nathaniel reached out and pulled her into his arms. You found her, she whispered. I think she wanted to be found, he replied. Evelyn must have known. That's why she gave you the locket. That night, they added a photo of Clara Hollis to the family tree. Underneath it, Mira wrote in large purple letters, My ma, she loved me. Beside it, she glued Evelyn's picture. And under that, she wrote, My mama again. She found me. Then she added one final image, a photo of herself and Nathaniel, standing beneath the blooming arch in the garden. She drew a heart around it. Underneath, she wrote, My forever. Amira returns to Evelyn's grave with Nathaniel by her side, carrying flowers and the completed family tree. But as she kneels by the stone, she whispers something that brings Nathaniel to his knees. It was late autumn when Nathaniel and Mira returned to the hilltop cemetery where Evelyn lay, beneath the tall oaks that rustled like old hymns. The wind carried the scent of fading leaves and chilled the tips of Mira's fingers, but she didn't mind. She held tightly to the poster board in her hands, the finished family tree, wrapped in clear plastic to protect it from the breeze. Nathaniel walked beside her in silence, carrying a bouquet of lavender and soft pink roses, Evelyn's favorites. They reached the grave at the edge of the slope. The stone was simple and elegant. Evelyn, heart artist, dreamer, beloved. She painted life into everyone she met. For a long moment, they just stood there. The wind curled around them, pulling at Mira's hair and the edges of Nathaniel's coat. A squirrel darted across the base of a nearby tree, pausing as if it, too, was paying its respects. Mira knelt and set the bouquet down, brushing leaves away from the foot of the stone. She placed the family tree gently beside it and stepped back, folding her hands in front of her. Nathaniel knelt beside her. She would have loved it, he said softly, gazing at the tree of names, photos, and colors. Especially the way you drew hearts around everyone. Myra nodded, her voice small. It's the first time I ever made one. Nathaniel looked at her. A family tree? No, she whispered. A family. The weight of her words landed in his chest like a stone in water, deep, rippling, undeniable. They stayed quiet, the stillness between them stretching long and wide. Then Mira stepped forward, placed both hands gently on the cold gray stone and leaned in close. Her lips barely moved. Her words were too quiet for the wind to steal. But Nathaniel heard them. I found him, Mama Evie. He came back. And then she added the 3 words that Evelyn had once asked her to say, the ones Nathaniel had nearly forgotten, but now could never forget. Come home, Nathaniel. His breath caught. His eyes flooded. He dropped to his knees, not from grief this time, but from release. From something rising in him that had been buried for years, hope. Not the kind found in speeches or boardroom victories, but the quiet, stubborn kind that lives inside the heart of a child brave enough to believe in people again and again. Mira turned to him, her small hand reaching for his. He took it, holding it like something sacred. I think this is our beginning, she said. He nodded, tears streaming freely now. Yes, it is. They sat together at Evelyn's grave until the sun began to dip behind the trees, casting long golden shadows over the hills. Mira leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder. Nathaniel spoke quietly, the way one speaks in a chapel or a dream. You gave her light, Mira. You gave her everything I couldn't. You did too, Mira said softly. You just didn't know how. He smiled through his tears. You're right, but I'm learning now. She looked up at him. Promise me you'll never leave again? He wrapped an arm around her. I promise. No more glass towers. No more locked doors. Just us. Mira smiled and held his hand tighter. As the sky faded to lavender, they rose together and walked slowly back toward the car. Before getting in, Mira turned back one last time and whispered, Goodbye, Mama Evie, but not forever. Then they drove away, leaving behind only the bouquet at the tree and the love that still clung to the wind. Back at home, as the stars began to blink awake, Mira placed the locket on her nightstand, turned on her moonlight, and climbed into bed. Nathaniel stood in her doorway, watching her settle in. You okay? He asked. She nodded. I think she's proud of us. I know she is. She yawned and snuggled under the covers. Will you stay until I fall asleep? He walked in and sat at the edge of the bed. As long as you need. Amira's eyes began to close. Her voice was barely a whisper now. You're not broken anymore. Nathaniel smiled, brushing her hair from her face. No, he said gently. You fixed me. And as the house settled for the night, somewhere deep in its walls, the piano played again. Just a few notes, just long enough for both of them to know. Love doesn't end, it simply finds another way to begin.
A grieving millionaire stands at his wife's funeral, lost in silence, until a barefoot little girl in a faded pink dress touches his arm and whispers 3 words. She promised me. He's never seen her before, yet she carries secrets his wife took to the grave. What follows is a journey of grief, mystery, and unexpected love, where a broken man learns that sometimes family finds you